Yeah, that's phenomenal. So he rejects A69, he accepts Photius, and we have entitled this live stream tonight, How the Pope Rejected the Filioque. Let's talk about that now, because that's the heart of the discussion. But there's a lot of other sub-themes, but I don't want to get too far away from the heart of it. So not only can we, obviously, it's a little bit of a stretch, but it is claimed by Siamakis that the 869 council rejected the Filioque because it doesn't recite it. Of course, we know the 867 council with over 1,000 bishops, unbelievable number, condemns the Filioque and deposes Nicholas the Pope of Rome. People don't talk about that council. I don't know why. 1,000 bishops utterly, rejecting anything that could be called papal primacy, papal infallibility, when they depose the Pope of Rome. And then 2 years later, everything was reversed. There's all kinds of intrigue as to why that happened. And Photius is deposed, and they have the 869 council, which doesn't seem to be favorable to the Filioque. And then you have, of course, the 879, the Eighth Ecumenical Council, and we're saying that the Pope rejected the Filioque. You want to unpack that as well? And Gregory, jump in anytime if you have something you want to add to this as being familiar with the text.
Now, people should be aware, why was the Filioque even a issue in these councils? And it pretty much starts with Photius before he knows it's going to be an issue. In Photius' first letter, it's sort of like it's called a Cisatic letter. It's essentially when they're enthroned as a patriarch, they send a letter to the other patriarchs so that people know their doctrinal views. And generally they quote creeds and just say pretty basic things everyone would accept.
Basic thing every major bishop does to the other major bishops.
Yeah. And Roman popes did the same thing. So this wasn't something strange. And in Photius' first letter, he makes mention of the Spirit proceeding from the Father alone. So this, because again, like the modern critical, skeptical scholar is going to say, oh, Photius blew this thing out of proportion because he was using this as this theological bludgeoning for political reasons. But that's actually not justified, because before Photius knew he would be embroiled in these controversies, he pretty much gives the same view that we'll read later in Mystagogy, right? So this is something that was always dear to Photius' heart, and really is only clear if you've read Photius' letters to really appreciate that. So imagine Photius thinking this is obvious and non-controversial, starts finding out that in Bulgaria, they're starting to introduce this new creed. It pretty much scandalizes him. And he seizes this as a theological opportunity to pretty much correct Pope Nicholas, who for political reasons isn't accepting Photius' patriarchate. It's almost certain that Nicholas actually did accept, Pope Nicholas did accept Photius' communion and reneged. A little funny story, just so people see it's not just me making it up. So Pope Nicholas sent 2 legates to the Council of Constantinople 861. Those legates accept Photius in the communion. Photius then sends legates to Constantinople to Rome, who then Nicholas communes. So one would think there's no problem. He accepts Photius. And then he gets buyer's remorse a year later. And the boat ride from Rome across the Adriatic Sea and then to Constantinople, it took time, but it didn't take that long for information to travel back then. And so this sort of buyer's remorse comes in. And what Pope Nicholas does is says, oh, the legates were paid off. They deceived me. They're excommunicated. And that's all you'll hear from a Roman polemicist, that Pope Nicholas never accepted Photius' communion. He even excommunicated the people that were involved. But here's the funny thing. And again, if you've read all of Pope Nicholas' letters, you see this. Something like a year or 18 months later, the people he excommunicated are writing letters for Pope Nicholas. So it was like a paper excommunication. They were still working for him, right? In order for him to say, I never accepted Photius, oh, they're excommunicated, but they still work for me and they still write my correspondence and sign it. Like it's pretty bizarre, and it shows this sort of really dishonest games that are being played in the Roman chancery at that time. So Photius, in order to depose a pope, wanted to call an ecumenical council. And it becomes pretty clear that during that time, because of the issues that are surrounding the Council of Trullo in the West, that an ecumenical council always solves a theological problem. And what was the obvious theological problem? The Filioque. So he deposed Nicholas, not for simply not accepting me in communion, that would not be very compelling and would not get 1,000 people to sign, but to say he's a heretic that changed the creed and he added the Filioque, could get, if even it weren't really 1,000, hundreds of bishops to sign, right? It could get the patriarchs of the East to sign. It could get the entire Constantinopolitan Synod to sign. And this was over the Filioque being introduced to Bulgaria. Now, this is why, and I think to some degree, Siamakis is not totally unjustified his inference, why Rome would have had to eat some sort of humble pie and make sure they confess the creed in 869 and then have no funny business in it, right? Because that was a major concern for people. And so this is not some sort of background issue. It's in the forefront of people's minds. And St. Photius was not shy about reminding people of that. So very quick, fast forward 10 years, we're in 879 now. And in 879, sadly for Pope John VIII, St. Methodius in Moravia starts running into problems again with Frankish missionaries over the Filioque, and St. Methodius will not teach Filioque, and also he will not teach in Latin. He wants to use the Slavonic liturgical language. Pope John VIII comes very hard in favor of St. Methodius and the usage of his creed, though he doesn't use the word Filioque. This comes the same year, right, that this council begins, and Pope John VIII wants to receive Photius. He wants to get Byzantine military protection, and he wants to get jurisdiction over Bulgaria as a concession. So he's not looking to rock any boats right now, and he knows what's rocking the boat, which is why he supports Methodius. Now, what gets ignored a lot, because everyone calls it a forgery until fairly recently, is Letter 350 of Pope John VIII. Letter 350 is a letter to Photius, probably written about a few months before he received the minutes of the Eighth Ecumenical Council. So this gives us a good window of what Pope John VIII was all about when the Eighth Ecumenical Council was occurring, because he was waiting for its decisions to be sent to him. Now, sadly for Pope John VIII, just when he's trying to get these concessions and get peace in the church and get military protection and all the things that he wanted, those people in Moravia, those Frankish missionaries, are stirring the pot again. And Pope John VIII comes down very hard in Letter 350. He calls them schismatics. He says the wrong about the Filioque. He even uses the word, if we accept the only rendering that we have, there might be some reason to infer that perhaps the term Filioque was a parenthetical added into the text, but we have no proof of this. That's just a guess. But he denounces their addition to anything in the creed. He calls those who are doing it schismatics. He calls them like Judas. And then he cautions St. Photius, but with everyone else, we gotta teach people the right thing. We can't rock the boat too much and anathematize all of them. So clearly he wrote this before he got the minutes of this council, which anathematized all of them. And so why do I bring this up? When Pope John VIII got the minutes of the Eighth Ecumenical Council and he accepted it, this whole idea that it prevented additions to the creed would have been wholly uncontroversial to Pope John VIII. Because we have letters within both years the council was held where he clearly is against additions to the creed. This is not a guesstimate or some sort of reconstruction. It's what's actually in his letters.
So let me just say this, isn't this also basically what Rome has continually held? They've withstood the pressure from other Western sources to change. And so this is what we would expect, that it's not a surprise. Or is it inconsistent with Hadrian and Nicholas? Was there a departure? Was that an issue for Hadrian and Nicholas? Was the Filioque adopted for a time and then repented of? Was it unique to John VIII?
This is a very big question. The larger question is, well, the smaller question is, did they have the Filioque in the creed? The answer is no. Nicholas didn't. Adrian II did it. And neither did John VIII. The bigger question is, what did Rome believe about the Filioque, and how strong were they in opposing it? And generally speaking, Rome was more of a stickler about not altering the creed and less a stickler about the actual doctrine. We have Pope Adrian I during Nicaea II taking a stance against the double procession of the Filioque in a letter to Charlemagne. So it's not that the papacy wasn't willing to oppose it. After that, because the papacy gets increasingly cowed by the Franks, they become a little more silent on the question, but they're more explicit. They still do not allow additions to the creed. We also have, for example, people in the Roman chancery at this time, like Anastasius the librarian, makes very clear that when the West confesses the Filioque, it does not mean double procession. Now, he's dishonest because the Franks did think it meant double procession. But this shows you what the Roman interpretation of the words was. It was like St. Maximus that had to do with the procession of the Spirit from Christ to us, like in Pentecost. It didn't have to do with his eternal causation, his hypostatic origin, right? So the Frankish doctrine and the Roman doctrine were very different. So for John VIII, the stance he's taking is more on the correctness of changing the creed. But he would have been like Pope Leo III, who said, the council has dictated this is the creed. It's not in my power to change it. And just so people were, Pope Leo III was writing about 80 years before John VIII. So this is not some sort of new Roman idea that the Pope can't change the creed. Pope John VIII was rather unremarkable in just accepting, yeah, this is what it is.